when you actually start to analyze Mike Pence, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, all with their own individual classified document scandals, where I think this goes from a political perspective, Buck, is I think two big things happen for Biden. I think, one, the idea that you're going to knock out Trump via charges, not only for the confidential documents, but also for January 6th, are effectively out the window.
Mike Pence has had classified documents found at his home, about a dozen of them right now. This is a situation. This is just getting absurd, and it makes me think that, you know, a lot of these former officials probably have classified in their homes. And I have to, on the one hand, Clay, there's the absurdity of this, Biden with the garage where he was holding it near the Corvette, you know, safe near the Corvette, you know, the whole thing. But when I was in the agency, when I was in the CIA, I knew this, everyone knew this, and anyone who's listening who had a clearance in the military, FBI, any of the, I think there's 17 intel agencies now, the federal government. I think there used to be 16. Any of those places, this would be considered an egregious, shortcoming, lapse, crime, whatever you want to, I mean, depending on the circumstances of it. But it's a big deal if you're just a normal person. The law is supposed to be the law. I'm just going to put this out there. Republican, Democrat, you know, you're not supposed to do this. And how can we have people who get sent to Leavenworth for 6 months for a minor infraction, even sometimes in the field, in the war zones of classified, when we have the top people at the very elite level of the national security apparatus treat this stuff like, they're using them like cocktail napkins or something, just strewing them about the table?
I think what it shows is there's clearly a double standard in terms of how people who are considered to be at elite levels of power, right? Vice presidents, presidents, high level, probably senators. When you're at the apex of power, the rules are not being applied to you anywhere near the same level. And I think this just further solidifies that there's not going to be any charges brought on anything related to the Trump classified documents. And to me, just kind of further elucidates how much of an overreaction and fever pitch there was surrounding all the Trump classified documents. Because the one thing you would say about Mike Pence, I think, is that basically his brand is moral rectitude, right? That would be how Mike Pence would sell himself, I think, to the larger community, that he is a paragon of morality. I think that's a big part of his brand. And if even he has classified documents, it's kind of the point where you assume that everybody does.
And also, I think there's, at this broader level, a recognition now that all that stuff from last summer about Trump and the Mar-a-Lago documents, and he's practically handing away the crown jewels of national security to our enemies. He needs to be prosecuted. He's a monster. They're such, honestly, man, CNN and the New York Times, they're just such a bunch of fraudulent little babies. The whole thing is so ridiculous. I mean, look at this now. They're finding classified all over the place. Anyone want to place bets if you were to go through, some of the Clinton residences, you might find some of this stuff?
Well, certainly I think Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and all their papers that they have at their presidential libraries. I mean, I do think you probably should be going through all of Biden's all of his doc.
Oh, I want an FBI run through at Chappaqua to see what's going on there with the Clinton residence. I don't think that the Clintons, look at Hillary's server.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think they probably all have it.
You know, at some point when you have many of the most recent and most senior members of the government, to include presidents and vice presidents, in classified document trouble, it starts to feel like maybe we need to revisit certainly the far more severe punishments that are given out to underlings in the national security apparatus, people like I used to be one of them, and act like every document that has classified stamped on it is, got the nuclear codes and we're all going to die if this gets into the wrong hands. I think maybe this could be a moment where we have some perspective. But apart from the legality of this, and we've got Andy McCarthy joining us to talk about that, I also think this is, Clay, the biggest moment here is the shifts that are occurring politically that will affect the country and its future as a result of this, tempest in a classified teapot, right? As a result of all this stuff that's going on, you have, I think now, Donald Trump is no longer in any realistic jeopardy from the whole Mar-a-Lago documents and the FBI raid. We should remember it because it was abusive. We should remember it because it showed the double standard that existed even before this and the heavy-handedness and the weaponization of the DOJ under a Democrat president like Biden against his chief rival. I mean, they're really not even trying to hide this stuff. But I think it takes Trump out of any possible jeopardy for that. And I agree with you, by the way. I think this also moves everything toward they can't prosecute Trump for anything anymore, but I want to hear your take on that. I think that with Joe Biden, this weakens him politically, doesn't take him out of the game politically, but certainly has spurred. I think after the midterms, it was 100% Biden running again. And now the powers that be behind the scenes of the Democrat apparatus are going to be having a conversation. Is it Joe? And then this Pence, the latest one is that Pence had classified documents at his home in Indiana. And this is confirmed now. I think Mike Pence, he basically had already said he was going to run for president, right? I think this makes it harder for him, a lot harder for him, because to your point in the last hour, he's supposed to be the guy who, and look, you can say this is unfair to hold anyone to standard, but he's supposed to be the guy who is, the Boy Scout who never makes a mistake and gets it done the right way. This is it's not a great look.
This is, it's a direct attack, Buck, on his brand. There's a great story I read a while back. Remember Brian Williams gets caught for lying about being under fire? And he basically lost his entire career. Brian Williams said the same things that Hillary Clinton said about being under fire when he was in Iraq. And it didn't even impact Hillary Clinton. And the reason was, well, people expect Hillary Clinton to lie and exaggerate, not tell the truth. They don't expect that from Brian Williams. Now, we can have a huge conversation about why we have a higher standard for truth-telling from a newscaster than we do from somebody running for the president of the United States. But Mike Pence's brand is, I'm above reproach. I am the moral authority. The one thing he doesn't have a lot of sizzle, but the one thing Mike Pence would sell is, you can trust me. I'm not going to let you down. It's why when Bill Clinton had, I was trying to see what phrase I can use, got involved in the situation with Monica Lewinsky, most people were like, yeah, I can see that. And frankly, it's why I think the Trump allegations involving, porn stars and all these different women, people were like, yeah, the guy's been married 3 times. He's a celebrity. He's never seemed like he was a paragon of virtue. So Trump and Clinton, I don't think those scandals ever really attached themselves because they didn't directly attack our perception. This, for Mike Pence, is a direct attack on what people think of him. And also, Buck, there's audio of Mike Pence, just like there was audio of Joe Biden saying, in the wake of the Mar-a-Lago raid, I could never imagine how anyone could have classified documents. Let's play this interview from Mike Pence, much like with Joe Biden. Everybody was like, oh, there's no way this could ever happen. What is Donald Trump thinking? And then they also have their own classified document scandal. Listen.
Did you take any classified documents with you from the White House?
I did not.
Do you see any reason for anyone to take classified documents with them leaving the White House?
Well, there'd be no reason to have classified documents, particularly if they were in an unprotected area.
Okay, so he directly contradicted himself. Now, I think this was accidental, probably just packing up boxes. They've gone back through them. They found them. But it makes me think that everybody has classified documents, Buck.
Which is amazing because if you're in your first week at the CIA, or I'm sure same thing for military folks, when you're getting your clearance, not everybody in the military has a clearance, and there's very different levels of clearances. Some of the intel agencies you have to have above a top secret level clearance for you to just be able to be working there. But this is treated with tremendous severity for everybody. And yet now we're seeing that all the people that are supposed to be at the very top of the national security food chain are incapable of keeping classified documents out of their homes. I mean, I also kind of wonder here, it's not like they would know if somebody, I'm surprised they wouldn't just destroy these things, honestly, which I know people say, oh, that's illegal or whatever. Yeah. But, the documents that you find in your garage, you could throw them in the fireplace. Nobody would ever know. So why is this? I think they just must have no idea where these things could even be, which to me goes to an even greater level of carelessness, if that makes sense.
No, that's a question I was going to ask you. Is it worse? And people out there listening, Trump admitted that he had classified documents. He said he had declassified them, but he knew that he had them and he knew where they were. And the dispute was over whether he had the right to retain possession of them, to refresh for everybody out there. Is that worse? Or is it worse to accidentally end up with classified documents in your possession? I actually think the accidental, the intent isn't there, but it speaks to not knowing that you have them as opposed to a dispute over whether or not you have the presidential authority to have them or not. Does that make sense? I think it's really kind of an intriguing question.
Yes. Well, there's also something that they refer to as positive control, active control. So, for example, if I'm going from a Langley, which, is the CIA headquarters, which I think they renamed like the George H.W. Bush Center for Intelligence or something. There's some new name for it, but it's, Langley is what all the cool kids call it. If you're leaving Langley, by the way, name for the estate that used to be there, and there's actually some tie-in to the family of Robert E. Lee in terms of ownership of that estate. I forget exactly what it is.
Oh, no, they're going to have to cancel the CIA now.
Well, Langley, the whole Langley thing, I don't know that name. But if you went from Langley to the White House and, you have these documents, let's say, there's supposed to be a way you actually convey them, you actually move them between places, and you were to go outside of that conveyance, and let's say you went into like a Dunkin' Donuts, you realize, I actually had a top secret document that I just stuffed in my jacket pocket. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to be handled, and that's a security issue. Obviously, you're not supposed to have some, but you could say I had positive control, meaning there was never a moment that I didn't know where it was and that it wasn't in my possession. And what we're seeing with these guys is it's not, because this comes up with, for example, Clay, I accidentally brought classified documents home. If you bring them home and you realize, oh my God, it's been in my briefcase this whole time, you bring it back, that's positive control. That's a security violation. But if you bring it home and it ends up, in a box with some old newspaper clippings and next to some baseball cards in the garage, and you've had people coming and going over the course of 6 years, that's not positive control. That's a whole other level of risk of exposure of the documents. So that's why what you're seeing with these individuals, they didn't even know. They just got classified hanging out in their homes. It's bad news. It's really not a good look.
Also, to your point, the government has no idea that they have this. So my thought also is, how important are these documents in general? Right? I mean, you handled classified documents. What percentage of them would you say, if suddenly someone had seen them, it would have been an oh crap moment, like to have that be visible, right? Like, in other words, all classified is not created equal. What are the odds that if we saw the 12 documents that Mike Pence has, that we would even blink about them?
Just in my rough estimate, personal opinion, back of the napkin math, I'd say 30% of what I saw that was classified, you could understand why you would really need to protect it at some level. And, maybe 5 to 10%, you were like, this really, this is a
big deal.
This being published or certainly getting out to the enemy would be a big deal. But a solid majority of it, you're like, well, because people don't even understand. A lot of it is a lot of things can be classified that are assessments, opinions of, thoughts of, and that can be classified based upon source derivation, right? But, a lot of people think a lot of things. So,
how many classified pieces of paper do you think the average vice president would see in a day? Is it like 10 or 15? Like, I mean, I just have no clue how voluminous the amount of paperwork that you would see would be that was classified.
These individuals have staffs and have so when classified documents go in, I did 2 Oval Office deep dive briefings for the intelligence community for President W. Bush, and it was all very controlled and very those documents, and that's for the PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing. So I was the lead briefer in a couple of Presidential Daily Briefings during the Iraq War. And those documents are at that level of sensitivity. There's a greater sort of knowledge and tracking of them.
Of where they are.
Of where they are and everything else. But you can go into, there are law enforcement, even local law enforcement, like the NYPD. There'll be people who have some level of classified access, much lower level than you would at, say, the CIA or the Pentagon. And so there's document handling procedures in place for that, right? So it really depends. But yeah, there's billions of sheets of paper that the government has. There are millions of people, they estimate, I don't even know what the number is, with either have or have had a clearance, and there are billions of pieces of paper with classified on it floating around there. So yeah, can we keep it all? Can we keep track of it all? Well, there's can we keep track of it all as a general concept, Clay? And then there's, hey, when you're the vice president, can you not bring this stuff home like it's a Hardy Boys novel that you're reading and you're just going to kind of leave it dog-eared next to the pool? I think that's fair. I think you can have that level of expectation.
I also just think how funny it is that all these politicians now, and I say all, but at least 2, Biden and Pence, both in interviews, no way this could ever happen. That's indescribably bad, basically. And then they both have their own classified document scandal now. It's just a lot of you out there are this is exactly
what about the political ramifications? But do you see it any differently, or on all 3 of those levels? There's the Trump aspect, the Biden aspect, and the Pence aspect, and how these all play together.
When you actually start to analyze Mike Pence, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, all with their own individual classified document scandals. Where I think this goes from a political perspective, Buck, is I think 2 big things happen for Biden. I think, one, the idea that you're going to knock out Trump via charges, not only for the confidential documents, but also for January 6th, are effectively out the window. I was of the opinion that Trump was going to be charged prior to the Biden classified documents, Buck. I think so.
I think this changes what was going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the Biden classified documents changes that. I also think it makes it more likely that Biden gets a challenger. Now, maybe it's Eric Adams, maybe it's Joe Manchin. Who exactly that challenger will end up being, I'm not sure. There will be an upstart, and this would be, I believe, the first challenger for an incumbent president since 1992. In terms of someone who would really try to go knock the president out in the primary. So it is a weakness of the president if he is not able to keep his own party from running against him, given the fact that he has incumbency. So I would say, to me, these are the 2 biggest impacts of the classified document scandal. At this point, I also just presume that everybody's got classified documents, whether, you got Hillary, you got Pence, you got Trump, you got Biden. I would bet that there's Obama classified documents out there. I would bet if he still has all his papers that George W. Bush might have them. Based on the prevalence of this, I just find it hard to believe there's not a general lack of a carefulness being paid. And also, it just, to me, probably, Buck, speaks to the voluminous nature of the papers that they're removing when the White House, when you're the vice president or the president, you're just throwing stuff in bags and boxes. I don't know that it's a really serious process when you're leaving like that.
It may have to change as a result of all this.
Well,
I think there's
true.
A recognition that just having a bunch of people show up like they're, moving the couch and the TV to somewhere else is not sufficient for security purposes. I gotta say, this is getting to the point though where there's such it has crossed the line into absurdity. And I think for a lot of people, that then just means they're going to want to move past this. So I don't know. I think that Trump benefits mightily from this circumstance. I think that Biden is, it's just still, no one really expects more from Biden. I think that's a big part of this. No one's surprised that he's a buffoon when it comes to classified documents. So I don't think it really changes all that much for Biden. And I think it maybe makes things a little bit harder for Mike Pence right now. But I also don't see this story. I don't see that. I keep saying, okay, I think we're there. There might be another batch or two found among these or some other individuals of note. But either way, I think the public will lose interest in this over time, is my sense. Could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a huge win for Trump, and I think it's an issue for Biden, and I don't think it's going away in terms of for Biden, whereas for Trump, I think it's basically over.